Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yudal, Daf 14 of Masechta Ksubis. Friends, Daf 14 we continue basically discussing the machlokas between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua regarding, when you have a girl who makes this claim, and do we trust her, or does she sort of or is the burden of proof upon her? So we're going to sort of continue discussing that today. So we're going to get started at the bottom of Daf Yud Gimel with Bey's last line of the page. How Orus v'Arusosos l'kamdu of Yosef. So there was a fellow and a fella, an engaged couple. They're engaged to each other. They came before Yosef. He amra minei v'hu amr in minoi. She says, look, I'm pregnant from my fiance. And he says, it's true. She's pregnant from me. Amr of Yosef. So Yosef says, all right, what are we concerned about? Chada dehuka moda. He's admitting that she's pregnant from him, right? As opposed to, in other examples that we've had, she makes a claim and he argues it. Here he's agreeing with her that he's the father. So what's there to be concerned, right? Meaning, do we have to be concerned that maybe now she's pasul l'kahuna, that she wouldn't be allowed to marry a kohen or anything like that because maybe she slept with some random, with like a nosen or a mamzer or somebody pasul? She's saying she's pregnant from him. He's saying it's true. So he's admitting it. And more so, even if he didn't admit it, didn't Rav Yehuda say in the name of Shmuel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that we trust her anyways. So therefore, Rav Yosef says, look, we can assume that it's like they are saying that she's pregnant from him, and she, and assuming that he's a kosher guy, she's a kosher girl. So Abai asks Rav Yosef, he says, 1 second. Uveha kilo mode machsher Rabbi Gamliel? 1 second. Rav Yosef, you gave two reasons for your opinion. The first one was that he's also admitting it. But the second reason was that even if he didn't admit it, still Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, anyways, that we would trust her. But says Abai, 1 second. Would Rabbi Gamliel really trust her in this case? Shmuel of Yehuda, but Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinina, sharp one. Halacha Rabbi Gamliel, that the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, that we trust her. Va'atlu saibid uvda, but don't do like Rabbi Gamliel. Adi ika rov ksherin etzla, unless most people are kosher to her. Let's go weiter for a second. V'hacha rov psulin etzla. Whereas in this case, most people are pasul to her. Meaning, she's right now an engaged girl. She's only mutter to her fiance and usher to everybody else. That's different than, for example, if you have a non-married girl who says that she was secluded with a kohen. So that's a situation where she's not married, she's mutter to everybody. So that would be where Rabbi Gamliel would say that we could trust her, where she's kosher to basically anybody, whereas in this case it's the opposite. She's basically pasul to everybody except for her fiance. So therefore, maybe we wouldn't say like Rabbi Gamliel. Let's read that again. Abai says to Yosef, in this case, if the fiance were not to admit that he's the father, would Rabbi Gamliel really trust her that she's pregnant from him? But Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, Shinin, a sharp one, halacha Rabbi Gamliel, that while the halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel, v'atlu saibid uvda, don't actually do like Rabbi Gamliel, do not trust her, adika rov ksherin etzla, unless there's a situation where pretty much all men would be kosher to her, i.e. she's not an engaged woman. V'acha rov psulin etzla, but in this case she's engaged, and basically everybody would be pasul to her except for her fiance, so therefore we can't necessarily trust that the person who she's pregnant from is basically only her fiance. But then Rav Yosef responds and he says, 1 second. Even if you look at what Shmuel's statement to Rav Yehuda itself, halacha vadlo saibid uvda, right? Meaning on the one hand, Shmuel says to Rav Yehuda that the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel. On the other end, he's saying, but don't actually do like Rabban Gamliel. Right? He says, halacha, v'lo saivir uvda. That the halacha is like Rabban Gamliel, but don't actually do like Rabban Gamliel. How do you make sense of this? Lichatchila, you should not do like Rabban Gamliel to have to trust her, right? If a Kohen came to ask, like, should I marry this girl, right? Like, if based on this girl's testimony, a Kohen comes and says, okay, can I trust this girl's testimony? Really, ideally not. But if it's b'di'evet, if they already got married, so then halacha, look, the halacha is that we could trust her. So hanami k'di'evet dami, and this is also right. In this case, there she's already pregnant, and then she's coming and saying that she's pregnant from him. So in this case, also says Rav Yosef that we would be able to trust her because it's also a situation of b'di'evet, and look, she's already pregnant. And she's saying that she's pregnant from him, so we can trust her in this case as well, says Rav Yosef. Rami le Abai le Rabba. Abai asks a kasha to Rabba. Umiyom Rav Yoshua in emenes. 1 second. Does Rav Yoshua really say that she's not believed? Right? The machlokas between Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer on the one hand, and Rabbi Yoshua on the other hand has been for the past few days that Rabbi Gamliel says we trust her, and Rabbi Gamliel says we can't just trust her. We can't just assume that she's kosher. But we have a kasher. Hey, Rabbi Yeshua of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseret. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseret testified al Almonas Isa, regarding an Almonas Isa shehi ksheira lekehuna, that she's able to marry a kohen. Friends, what the heck is an Almonas Isa? Okay, you ready? Here's an Almonas Isa. You want to know what Almonas Isa is? I'll tell you what Almonas Isa is. It's it's a little bit complicated, but not so complicated. You ready? Here it is. All right, you have Sarah. Sarah is married to Reuven. Okay, now they kind of get divorced. What does that mean? It means that Reuven takes a get and he throws it to Sarah. The question: where does it land? Did it land closer to him? If it lands closer to him, so then she's not divorced and they're still married. If it lands closer to her, so then they are divorced and she's a divorcee. Now it's unclear who it landed closer to. Reuven now dies. So now what's the deal with Sarah? Is she a widow or is she a divorcee? What's the nafkamina? Can she marry a Kohen? If she's a divorcee, she cannot marry a Kohen. If she's a widow, she can marry a Kohen. Nonetheless, she goes and marries a Kohen. So now what do we do? Right? We're not sure. Is she a widow or is she a divorcee? She then goes and marries a Kohen. They have a kid. So now what? We don't know. Is this kid, if she's a divorcee, the kid's a chalal. If she's a widow, the kid's a Kohen. The kid then gets married. And now you have this kid's wife who doesn't know, is she married to a chalal or is she married to a Kohen? The kid dies. That's Almonas Isa. This widow now, the kid's widow, what's her deal? Right? If she was married to a chalal, well then she cannot marry a Kohen. If she was married to a Kohen, then she's a widow of a Kohen. She can marry another Kohen. So that's what this Almonas Isa is. That you have this guy throws a get. We don't know, is it closer to him? Is it closer to her? She then goes and marries a Kohen. They have a kid. That kid, we don't know what his status is. He gets married. Then he dies. What's the deal with the widow of the kid? So says, hey, Rabbi Yeshua of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir. Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseir testified al Almonas Isa, regarding the case of the widow of this kid. Shehi ksheira l'chahuna. She's permitted to marry a Kohen, i.e., we keep her on a chazaka. We assume, look, we don't know what the deal is, but look, we assume that she's kosher. So how come by Almonas Isa, Rabbi Yeshua is assuming that she's kosher, and yet, in this case, where if this girl says that she was secluded with a Kohen or she became pregnant from a Kohen, we can't assume that she's kosher and that she can marry a Kohen. How come Rabbi Yeshua in our Mishnah is saying that we cannot assume that she can marry a Kohen, and yet by Almonas Isa, he's saying that we can assume that she can marry a Kohen? So Rabbi responds to Abai, says, yeah, but over there, Isha Nises Bodekets V'Nises. Look, in the case of Almonas Isa, what do you think? This woman who married the kid, you think that she didn't first look in to the circumstances of his parents' situation to make sure that she wasn't marrying a chol? Of course she did. She did research before she got married, and she made sure before she married this kid that, you know, she got witnesses or whatever it was to say that, look, Lemaisa, the get was closer to him than it was to her, and she's a widow rather than a divorcee, and the kid is a kohen, and it's fine. Yet in our case, if we look at our Mishnah, where it's talking about this girl who became pregnant, she's not married, she became pregnant. What you think, if she's going to be becoming pregnant from somebody who she's not married to, you think she's doing such meticulous research to make sure that he's not a halal or a nasan or a mamzer or something? Probably not. And therefore, while Reb Yoshua is saying that in the case of Amanas Isa, where she marries this kid, we can assume that she's kosher because she did her research before getting married. But in our Mishnah, we cannot assume that she's kosher because we cannot assume that she did her research before having a relationship with this fellow outside of the context of marriage. Omar Rava says, Rava to Rabbi Yoshua kasha. So Rava now says, look, we just got all excited about Rabbi Yoshua. How come Rabbi Yoshua doesn't trust her in our Mishnah and yet does trust her in the context of Almanas Isa? Gamliel lo kasha. But what is Rabbi Gamliel just free of kashas? What? There's nothing wrong with Rabbi Gamliel's position. Rabbi Gamliel and our Mishnah says that we could trust her, and yet V'akatani Seifa, if we continue in that brayso, what does it say? Rabbi Gamliel said to them, I guess to Rabbi Yeshua and the Rabbi ben Beseira, Kibanu eduschem. Look, we hear you out. We hear what you're saying about the Amanas Isa, that we can trust her and that she can marry a Kohen. But Aval Manaise, it says Rabbi Gamliel, what can we do? Sharei Gazer Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a gezerah shelo lahoshiv bezdin al kach, that we're not going to basically paskin this way, right? That we're not going to say that an Almanas Isa can marry a Kohen. Shekwanim shomen lochem l'rachik, that the Kohanim might listen to you if it's to distance themselves from a certain person. Aval lo l'kayv, but not to come closer. Meaning the Kohanim are sort of meticulous, and they're not going to rely upon this ruling to say that, okay, they'll now go and marry an Almanas Isa. They won't feel comfortable with that. So here we see that Rabbi Gamliel is actually not trusting this Almanas Isa, right? So while in our Mishnah, when she says that she became pregnant from a Kohen, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer are saying, okay, sure, we could trust her that she became pregnant from a Kohen, and yet, when it comes to Almanas Isa, we cannot trust this widow of this kid to be able to marry a Kohen. So Rabbi Gamliel over here seems to be conflicting as well. So where am I? So rather says Rava, look, Rabbi Gamliel lo kasha. I can explain to you what's the deal with Rabbi Gamliel. Hosam bari hacha shema. Look, in the case of our Mishnah, she's saying with 100% certainty that she became pregnant from a Kohen. That's what she's saying. She's saying, look, I know that I became pregnant from a Kohen. Yet, in the situation of Almanas Isa, ultimately nobody really knows. Just like she doesn't, just like we don't know if the get was closer to him or closer to her, she also doesn't know at the end of the day. And therefore, because it's a situation of shema, of possibility and not certainty, so therefore Rabbi Gamliel is not willing to trust her in the case of Almanas Isa, even though he is willing to trust her in the case when she says that she knows that she got pregnant from a Kohen, because that is a situation of definitive of Bari. Rabbi Yeshua Nami lo kasha, and also Rabbi Yeshua is no problem, because Hasam Chad Sfeika in our Mishnah, right, it's only one level of suffix, right? Meaning we don't know. Did she become pregnant from a Kohen like she says she did, in which case it's totally fine, or maybe she became pregnant from a Nasan or a Mamzer, in which case it's really not fine. It's just, it's one suffix. Hacha trace feke, whereas in the situation of Almanas Isa, there's sort of two levels of suffix, right? There's the suffix of, is the mother a halala or not, right? Was she a divorcee or was she a widow? And then there's also the level of suffix for the child as well. So there's two levels of suffix, and therefore Rabbi Yoshua is willing to say by Almanas Isa that we can, keep her on her chazaka, that she is kosher, whereas by when she says that she became pregnant from a Kohen, where it's only one level of suffix, we cannot trust her and assume that she's kosher to marry a Kohen. Hilkach Rabbi Gamliel, therefore, according to Rabbi Gamliel, Olam Le Bari, clearly Rabbi Gamliel, his opinion is that a definitive argument is so strong that afilu b'chad sveka nami machshir, that even, that her definitive argument of I definitely became pregnant from a Kohen is stronger than the fact that, well, what if it wasn't a Kohen? What if it was somebody else? That one level of suffix, the Bari, her definitive argument is stronger than the possibility of, well, maybe it's not like what she's saying. Vikil le Shema, and Rabbi Gamliel, really doesn't give significance to sort of possible arguments. Da'afilu b'sfeik sveka nami pasul. Right, as we see that when it comes to Almanas Isa, where at the end of the day, nobody really knows if she's a divorce, if the mother was a divorcee or a widow, right? So therefore, that really, we can't rely upon it at all. And therefore, even a situation, it's a sveka, it's sort of two levels of suffix, right? It's the suffix of the mother and suffix of the kid. And still, even though it's two levels of suffix, he's not willing to rely upon this girl to say that the child was a Kohen and not a Cholol. Because it's a Shema, Rabbi Gamliel is not willing to rely upon that. Rabbi Yoshua, Alam Lechad Sveka, whereas Rabbi Yoshua says that, when it's only one level of suffix, then it's pretty strong. Ta'afilu bibari nami pasul, that even against, right, she's saying that for sure she became pregnant from this Kohen. Rabbi Yeshua doesn't want to hear of it because, well, what if she became tummy from a nasan or a mamzer or something like that? Vikil le sveka, but Rabbi Yeshua says that sort of that second level of suffix really dilutes the suffix dafilu b'shema nami machshir, that even though even though we can't really be sure if the get landed closer to him or closer to her, but she's saying that it landed, that she did research and that really she was a widow and this child is a Kohen, even though we can't really be sure for 100% certainty. But anyways, it's against the sveka, sort of a second level of uncertainty, and therefore Rabbi Gamliel, according to Rabbi Yeshua, once you have sort of a double level of uncertainty, it really becomes not very strong at all, and he's willing to assume that, to allow this Almanas Isa, this widow of this child, to be able to marry a Kohen. Alright. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Ezu Almanas Isa, what's the situation of Almanas Isa? Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzeres, lo mishum nisinus, lo mishum abdei melachim. So an Almanas Isa, that Rabbi Yeshua says can marry a Kohen, so that's a situation where there's no questions about whether this kid is a mamzer or a nasin or like the child of a slave of a king. But just that the only question is this child a cholol, and we could rely upon her to say that he's not a cholol and he's a regular Kohen, and she can marry a Kohen. Amar Reb Meir says, Reb Meir shemaiti kol she'ein ba echad mikol elu masin lechuna. And it says Reb Meir apparently sounds like it's the same thing as the Tanakama, that as long as we're not concerned that this kid was a nasin or a mamzer or a Eved Melachim, so then we can allow this widow to be able to marry a Kohen. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer, it now says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Mishum Reb Meir, in the name of Reb Meir, right? Also, right, we had just said, right, Omer Reb Meir, now says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, in the name of Reb Meir. V'chein ha'y Reb Shimon ben Menasya Omer Kidvar, also Reb Shimon ben Menasya would say, Eizu Almanas Isa, what's this Almanas Isa who can marry a Kohen? Kol shenitma ba safek cholol. Right? When there's this question of maybe her husband was a cholol or not. Now they say something, sort of throw a wrench in things. They say, Makir Nisrael mamzerim shebeneim v'in makir chololim shebeneim. Now they seem to flip around what they're saying, and they say that, well, when it comes to a mamzer, so basically people know, right, the yentis, right? The yentis, they for sure know when there's a mamzer. There's a mamzer in the community, the yentis know. Right? So therefore, Jews are good at knowing, at sort of sniffing out mamzers. So therefore, if this kid was a mamzer, then they would know. And from the fact that it isn't, not everybody know, right? It's not like common knowledge that this kid is a mamzer, so it must be that he's not a mamzer, because if he was, everybody would know. Whereas opposed to, but they don't necessarily know all the chalols, right? And therefore, actually, what they're saying is that you would not be able to rely upon Almanas Isa in a situation of chalol, because he actually might be a chalol and we don't know. So it's weird, because on the one hand they're saying that Dafka Safek Chalol would be this case of Almanas Isa who would be able to marry a Kohen, yet then they immediately say, look, that they didn't know who's a mamzer, and if this kid was a mamzer, they would know. But they actually don't know about chalols, and therefore there really is no way to know if this kid was a chalol or not, and therefore she would be unable to marry a kohen. So the Gemara is going to ask, what does it mean that they're sort of like flipping around their opinion? What's going on here? Amar Mar, we said earlier, Ezui Almanas Isa. So what's in Almanas Isa? Kol she'ein ba lo mishum mamzerus. Right, as long as we're not concerned that maybe this kid is a mamzer, lo mishum nisinu, so that this kid is a nosin. Right, it comes from like the Givonim, these people that sort of snuck their way into being saved when the Yidden were capturing Eretz Yisrael with Yoshua. And not we can't have any concern that they come from like slaves of kings. Hachalol kosher, but a chalol would be kosher, right? That if we're not sure if this kid is a chalol or not, right? We're not sure if the mother was divorced or widowed. So then, in that case, we could say that she can marry a kohen. Ma'ishna hanoch de oraisa, chol nami de oraisa. So now we say, one second, how come we're saying that there can't be any concern that maybe this kid was a nosin or a mamzer or an eved melachim, but if we're not sure if he's a chalol or not, then it's okay? I don't understand. What is it? Because nosin and mamzer is mida oraisa, whereas a chalol is mida abonon. Chol nami d'oraisa. Chol is also d'oraisa. So why are we taking it less seriously? Visu, and more so, Amr Reb Meir, says Reb Meir, Shamaiti kol she'ein ba echad mikol elu masiin lechuna. Says Reb Meir, right after the Tanakama says that an Almanas Isa cannot have anything to do with Nosin, Mamzer, Eved Melachim, only if the suffix is about chalol. Comes with Meir and he says, Shamaiti kol she'ein ba'echad mikol elu. That an Almanas Isa cannot have any of these concerns about Nosin, Mamzer, Eved Melachim. Right. But if it's a suffix chalol, so then that would be Almanas Isa, and she can marry a kohen. Right, where am I? So then she can marry a kohen if the only else is if it's just a suffix chalol. Hanu Tanakama. So isn't Reb Meir saying the same thing as the Tanakama, that if it's a concern about Nosin, Mamzer, Eved Melachim, so then she cannot marry a kohen. But if it's a suffix chalol, then she can't marry a kohen. It sounds like Reb Meir and the Tanakama are saying the same thing. Visu, and then more so, Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer says Reb Shimon ben Elazar Mishum Reb Meir in the name of Reb Meir. V'chino Reb Shimon ben Menashe Omer Kedvarav Ezu Almanas Isa, who is an Almanas Isa. Kol shenitma ba suffix chalol. So if we're not sure if this kid is a chalol or not, so that would be Almanas Isa. But then they flip it around in their head and say, Makir niso mamzerim shebeneim. Look, the Yidden know who a mamzer is, and therefore if this kid was a mamzer, they would know. And the fact that they don't necessarily know that this kid is a mamzer, so then she would be able to marry a kohen. But at the end of the day, we don't know who the chalols are, and therefore she would not be able to marry a kohen, because there's a chance that he's a chalol. So they're like, but didn't they just say that that if we're not sure if the kid is a chalol or not, so then she would be able to marry a kohen? So like, we have a lot of questions, right? Isn't Reb Meir saying the same thing as Tanakama? What's the deal with Reb Shimon ben Elazar in the name of Reb Meir, who seems to be saying first that Almanas Isa is by chalol, but then we're saying actually chalol we have to be concerned about? Like, what's the deal? Omer Reb Yochanan, so says Reb Yochanan, Mamzer tzovach v'chalol shosek iben ika benayu. The nafkamina is, what if you have a situation where you call this kid a mamzer and he protests against it, but when you call him a chalol, he just kind of keeps quiet? Tanakama sover, so the Tanakama holds, kol psul dekaru le v'shosek pasul. So the Tanakama holds that any of these psuls that you call him it and he keeps quiet, then that is trouble. Whether it's that you call him a nosin and he keeps quiet, Right, let's go weiter. Vachikamer, let's read that. He's going to explain. The Gemara is going to explain. Vachikamer, this is what it means. Tanakam, Vachikamer, Tanakam. This is what the Tanakam is saying. Ezu Amonas Isa. Who is an Amonas Isa who can marry a Kohen? Kol she'ein ba lo shtuk mamzerus. As long as this kid who they were married to, who she was married to, if you call him a mamzer, he didn't keep quiet. V'lo shtuk nesinus. And if you call him a nosin, he didn't keep quiet. V'lo shtuk avdei melachim. If you call him the sort of coming from the slaves of kings, so and he keeps quiet. V'lo shtuk chalal, and not if you call him a chalal and keep quiet. In any of those cases, if they keep quiet, so then you have to be concerned that maybe they actually are it, right? So if you call him a chalal and he keeps quiet, so then the Tanakama would say that she would be unable to marry a kohen. If you call him the Reb Meir, to which Reb Meir responds, he says, "Look, hanachu dikapasule bikol." Look. In these situations where they're not allowed to marry into the congregation, right? If somebody's a nosin or a mamzer, they can't marry into the congregation, and therefore we actually have to be concerned, like, why are they keeping quiet? Aval shtuk cholol. But if you call a fellow a cholol and he keeps quiet, kosher, he would be kosher v'adashosik mishum dul ichpasle. And the reason why he's keeping quiet is because he doesn't care, right? Meaning, when it comes to a nosin and a mamzer, so they're not allowed to marry into the congregation, and therefore, it's actually a problem. Whereas when it comes to a chalal can marry anybody who he wants, right? A chalala cannot marry a kohen, but a chalal can marry whoever he wants, and therefore, like, okay, so he's keeping quiet, but I mean, it's because he might not be a chalal anyways, but it's just that he's saying, look, even if I am a chalal, like, who really cares? It doesn't actually affect my ability to get married, so that's why he's keeping quiet, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he is a chalal. Right, so Tanakama says that even if a chalal keeps quiet, even if you call a fellow a chalal and he keeps quiet, it means that he is a chalal and she'd be unable to marry a kohen. Whereas Reb Meir is saying, no, when it comes to a chalal, if you call this kid a chalal and he keeps quiet, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a chalal. It could just mean that he doesn't care, because even if he was a chalal, he'd still be able to marry whoever he wants anyway. So what's the big deal? We come with Reb Shimon ben Elazar the Tanakama, and then Reb Shimon ben Elazar responds to Tanakama to Reb Meir to the first sort of interpretation of Reb Meir. And Reb Shimon ben Elazar then says in the name of Reb Meir, Ishmiel loch the machshir Reb Meir b'shtika, that if you heard that Reb Meir says that even if someone is quiet, then the wife who's a widow would still be able to marry a kohen. Lo dekaru le chalol v'shosik. That's not talking about where you call him a chalol and he keeps quiet. El dekaru le mamzer v'shosik. No, rather, if you call a fellow a mamzer and he keeps quiet, then he is kosher. By the shosik, because the reason why he's keeping quiet is savar mamzer kala isle, because he figures, look, the Yidden know who's a mamzer, and he doesn't feel like he needs to respond, because look, if he was a mamzer, everyone would know that he's a mamzer, and the fact that they don't know that means clearly he's not a mamzer, so he didn't feel any need to respond. Aber mamzer v'tzavach chol v'shosek posel. But if you call him a mamzer and he responds, but right, if you call him a mamzer and he responds and he feels like he needs to defend himself because they assume that he's a mamzer, chol v'shosek, or if you call him a chalal and he keeps quiet, posel, then we have to assume that he is actually posel, that he is a chalal. By the ishtik sover mistayel lo de lamafke le mikol. And the reason why he's keeping quiet is because he just figures like what's the point? Yeah, fine, so he's a chalal, who cares? Either way, he'll be able to marry into the generation anyway, into the congregation anyway, so he just doesn't feel like he has to defend it, but yeah, he's a chalal, sure. Tani Chada, Rabbi Yossi Omer, shtuk mamzer kosher, shtuk chalal posel. So one brisa teaches that according to Rabbi Yossi, if you call him a mamzer and he keeps quiet, then it's kosher, but if you call him a chalal and he keeps quiet, then it's posel. V'tani idach, the other brisa says shtuk chalal kosher, shtuk mamzer posel. The other brisa says that if you call him a chalal and he's quiet, then it's kosher. If you call him a mamzer and he's quiet, then he's posel. We say lo kasha, it's no problem. Ha Tanakama liber to Reb Meir, that one of them is Tanakama according to Reb Meir, right? That Tanakama according to Reb Meir had said that if you call him a chalal and he keeps quiet, so then it's okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar libidor meir. This is Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar according to Meir, who says that no, if you call him a chol and he keeps quiet, it is taka not okay. Alright friends, well that was Daf Yud Daled of Masechet Ksubis. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.